So we're going to take a look at a jQuery modal window that is triggered by a graphic link. And this is similar to the book, but this one actually works. So this is the graphic that is triggering the modal. And you can see that I'm using a Font Awesome little icon bar here, and I have a close button. Clicking close is the only way to get this thing to close. Clicking away is not going to close it. And the HTML for this is pretty basic. You will see that we've got a little header. We've got our link that triggers the window, and it's got an ID of share. And then you'll see here's the anchor. There is no href. If I put an href in, it would be just the hashtag, because this actually should not link to anywhere. We're using it as a trigger for the modal. And so then I've got the ending anchor. And below that, this image is displaying in the body. So that's this image. This is our trigger. And then at the very bottom, with an ID of share options, this is the modal, this little section here. This is the content that is displayed in the modal, and it is hidden by default. And then you'll notice at the bottom, I'm pulling in the library, jQuery library, and I have two different jQuery scripts that we're going to be taking a look at. The first script is going to run or the second script, the modal init for initializing, that's going to run automatically after the page loads. And the modal window is actually an object with methods. So we'll take a look at each of those. First, I am going to show you the CSS for the modal. And you can see that it's got an absolute position. This is a little overkill on the z-index, but definitely want to make sure it's going to be on top. I probably could have just set it to 1 or 10. And then I've got some padding and did my background color. For the close, which in this case is an actual button, I'm making the cursor a pointer. And then I've got some IDs that are styled just to make that little modal look better. I'm also styling the close and the hover on the close. So if you click on this, you'll notice the hover on the close changed. And actually, I've got hover set on all of this. This is all styled. Okay, so that's basically what this is doing. Okay. And then if we look at init, this is going to run first. The reason it's going to run first is because we've got the function ready for this. Okay, remember that starts your jQuery. We don't have it in the modal window. Okay, the modal window is simply a modal object, and there are methods inside here. Okay, so here is the ready function. And you can see that we are looking at the ID of share options. So come over here. Here is the ID of share options. So everything in this division, okay? And we're detaching it. So we're making sure that when the page loads, the modal is not displayed. Okay, and then we've got a little event handler. So when they click on the share ID, so let's look over here. Here is the share ID. That's our trigger. So when they click on that, okay, then this is our event handler. When they click on it, it's going to run through this anonymous function. The anonymous function is using the modal object to open a window. Okay, it's using a content variable for the content, and it's setting a width and a height. So where does that modal object come from? That comes from this section of code. And in our HTML, we are loading that modal code first, and then we are loading modal init. So by the time modal init loads, it already knows about the modal object. It's already created it. So we have a modal object, little anonymous function here, where we are storing the window, and we have the markup for our modal. So this is going to be the modal. We've got a class set to modal, which we have style in our CSS. Then for the content, and if you notice with the modals, there is a class of modal, and then there is inside a class for the content. Okay, so this is the content, and we've got the class set to modal content, and then we have a little variable for our close button, and this is all of the HTML required for that close button, and you'll notice that we set the class to modal close. And when we looked at the CSS, there was specific styling for that class, as there is styling for the content and the window itself. So we create all these little variables. Then we take our modal variable and we add to it the content and close. So it is connecting all of this HTML. Okay, then we create a little event handler for the close button. So here's our close variable. It contains the close button. We now have an event handler for that. So we're preventing the default action, and we are taking our modal object and we are closing it. Then you'll notice that it is returning all of this. So when the modal object is used, all of this is set up, and then all of this gets returned. So first thing that's available is the position method. Okay, and so all this position method is doing is it's setting a top and a left position, and then we're updating the CSS using the top and the left and adding the scroll position. And this is how we're going to try to center the modal window. And it's fairly well centered. It's not perfect. Okay, but what the book does is mathematic gymnastics. They do it a little bit different. So if you prefer to use the code from the book, even though their modal window does not work, by all means, I'm going to actually pull this over. So this is how the book is calculating the location of the modal. So if you want to do all of that, that's fine. Okay, if you want to simplify it, you can do it like I did. So I kind of give it a starting position for the top and the left, and then I just use window.scroll top and window.scroll left and made that the new position. Then we have an open method. And so the open method, we are receiving settings. So when this gets called, we're getting settings. So where does this get called? Well, if you remember, it gets called over here. Okay, so these are the settings. Okay, so those settings are coming in, and you can see that we're setting a width and a height. We're appending that to the body. So settings.width, settings.height, that is how we're getting our width and height. So if we come back over and we look, here we've got settings.width, settings.height, and we also have settings.content that we are appending. So that is how those are connected. Modal.open is connected to this. Okay, and also to this. And that all gets appended to the body. Then, if the window is resized, this is a little event handler for that. And it just goes back up and runs through modal position again. Okay, and you'll notice that after the window is opened, it automatically runs through modal position, and then anytime the window is resized, it runs through that as well. Then we have a little close method so that when modal.close is used, it's running through this, and we're removing the content, we're detaching, and then we're removing the event handler. Okay, we no longer need the event handler if the modal is not displayed. Okay, so there's no reason to resize it if it's not there. Okay, so that's basically how all of this code interconnects. And like I said, the books is not currently working, but the code is pretty much the same as what I have. The only difference between what the book did and what I did is how they're calculating that centering of the modal. That is the only difference.